Good day. I, Toka Masbook, have been assigned by the Assured Auditors Senior Audit Manager to conduct a risk assessment about the prospective client, Airwaves International Limited. Airwaves International Limited is a privately owned airline in South Africa that since 1965. It's an airline that operates as a hub and spoke network as it connects over 40 local and international destinations. Their services are based on flight and air transportation of goods. Its current financial year is 2020, which ends at 31 December 2020. And the major reason behind all this task is to be able to help the assured auditors to be able to decide on whether or not to accept Airways International Limited as their client.
Okay, at first, we're going to focus on the financial ratios of the Airwaves International Limited. Um, Firstly, we'll deal with the current ratio. The current ratio has shown a slight increase from 2019 to 2020, which means that the Airwaves International Limited is not able to cover its current liabilities and with its current assets. Moving along to debt to equity ratio shows that there have been a decrease also in from 2019 to 2020, which shows that most of the operations of the Airwaves International are financed by debt, not equity. Moving to debt to asset Moving to debt to assets ratio, it shows that there have been a quite increase in it from 2019 to 2020. That shows that indicates that about of 148% of the debt on Airwaves International Limited, it is covered by its asset, which indicates a very high risk of defaulting of loans for Airwaves. And then the net income margin there's a very significant decline in it from 2019 to 2020, which indicates great loss also, which is means low profitability. And return on assets, there's been also a significant decline in it from 2019 to 2020, which shows that Airwaves International Limited have incurred a very great loss, or in, since it a great loss since it was not able to generate income from its assets. Moving along, we have identified risk for the assured auditors, and if they happen to accept Airwaves International Limited as their client. The first one is the financial risk. You can see that through the profitability ratios that Airwaves International Limited, it has low profitability, so it won't be able to pay the audit fee that is expected by the assured auditors, which is 18,400,000 rand, and therefore because it incurred a loss, it might be because of COVID-19, and therefore moving along to the liquidity, it is very low, as Airwaves may decide to say, we'll pay the audit fee in the next financial year, which is 2020, but it won't be able to. Looking at the current ratio, it shows that it cannot even settle its short-term debt. Okay, we move to the second part, which is reputation risk. Airwaves International Limited have got negative publicity through the data breach, which by they have linked the information that is very sensitive to customers. So if assured auditors accept it as a client, it can be deeply affected by it too, as some potential future clients may assume that even assured auditors are capable of disclosing information that is meant to be confidential. And then we move to the third part, which is association risk, which comes to corruption. We can see that the chairperson of Airwaves, Tom Mr. Tom Weber is involved in corrupt activities in another business that he manages, which is called Emanzini Water. And accepting this loan as a client, accepting Airwaves as a client, assured auditors stand a chance to might lose a public trust. And then moving along to the legal issues, Airwaves have legal issues which they cannot comply with this industrial legislation. So that is the opposite, whereby assured auditors as an auditing firm, it is expected to be able to comply, which compliance with legislation is very essential. Okay, this part we focus on cases that create doubt regarding the integrity of Airwaves. Mr. Tom Weber, chairperson of Airwaves and also chief executive of Emanzini Water, is involved in corruption. So and even with the forensic report that has been compiled, that contains evidence about him being involved in corruption, he still refused to take responsibility for those actions. He still refused to take accountability for those actions. And so we move along to Maggie Paxson, which is a debtors clerk at Airwaves, neglect her duties. We have seen that in the internal audit risk register. We have seen that there are no review of credit notes. So that shows that the debtors clerk, which is Maggie Paxson, does not do his job, his responsibility well, as we all know that he's responsible for the account of customers, but he does not do such. That means he neglects his duty, which implies both these cases highlight lack of integrity by the Airwaves. Here we focus on concerns that arises regarding the Airwaves approach to business. We can see that there is no review of quarterly financial statements by the senior persons like a CEO. So that have resulted to the significant errors on the financial statements. However, that may lead to assured auditors being at high risk of expressing a wrong opinion on the financial statements if it happens to accept Airwaves as their client. Here we focus on risk on Airwaves, governance structure, and reliability of information. We move to Mr. Craig Karev, who is the chief financial officer of Airwaves, have no experience of dictatorship, as we see errors repeatedly being made on the financial information under his watch. And then we move to the regular withdrawal of petty cash being made consistently, but a high balance of cash is still maintained, which this creates a doubt about the amounts that are reflected in the statement of financial position in that section of cash and cash equivalent, which those amounts may be reflected may be likely to be unreliable. Here we focus on regulation that can restrict audit service. International accounting standard can restrict audit service of assured auditors. As due to COVID-19, the timeline have changed, but international accounting standards still expect the assured auditors to provide the audit service like before. So that can make assured auditors to work under pressure in order to obtain the audit evidence or do a risk assessment for the client. At the meantime, they may incur a risk of not being compensated with the required amount of audit fee due to the Airwaves liquidity or low profitability. In conclusion, I believe that assured auditors must not accept airwaves as international limited as clients because of airwaves lack the ability to pay high audit fees, judging from the financial ratios, as they show that there is low profitability and also there is low liquidity. And then also looking at the second part, which is bad publicity about data breach, which is very bad publicity, and assured auditors don't need to be associated with such bad publicity. And moving along to non-compliance with legislation, airwaves have shown a tendency not to comply with legislations, and that disadvantages them from being considered as assured as a client of assured auditors. And moving along to the second part, which is measures to mitigate risk. You can look at the financial risk. How can financial risk be mitigated? It can be mitigated by establishing a record keeping system that works from the very beginning of the financial year until the end. That means it can help to avoid errors in the financial statement. And then moving along to the reputational risk, in order to avoid the bad publicity, the bad publicity that is brought by the data breach, you need to be the business needs to immediately be upfront about that data breach that has occurred. Maybe it can be due to cyber attacks, and then for it moves along to the one of association. It can be for the business may have to learn every legislation that is introduced to regulate that industry to operate in that way, by gain better understanding about those legislation. In that way, you'll be able to perform in accordance to those legislations. Thank you.